Hello everyone, this will be a first look video on a pretty interesting handheld that I've been testing for about 2 weeks now. This is the Pimax Portal, and it's a product that might seem simple at first glance, but it's like an onion with a lot of layers, and in this video, we're going to try to pull back some of them. If you like videos like this and you aren't already, please consider subscribing to the channel to support my work. Now this device comes in a lot of configuration options, and we'll talk more about some of the different aspects later on, but I do want to quickly say that this is the lower end version of this device with an LCD screen. There's another one with a QLED screen, but that's not the one that I'm using in this video. So let's start off by talking about some of the hardware features of this guy. So as you can see, we have a handheld that is not too dissimilar from a Switch. We have a central unit in the middle and controllers on the sides. Let's talk about these controllers first and then work our way to the main unit because this thing has a lot of different things going on. So these controllers are attached with magnets and the magnets themselves are pretty strong. We can just set this unit down for a moment so we can talk about the controls. Now, as you can see, unlike the normal Switch, these do not slide into the main console and instead use magnets on the inner side. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not these things are fragile when you're using them, and I would just say that these are a lot stronger than you would think. If you put your finger in here when these are going together, your finger is going to get messed up. We have two very interesting controllers, and in this mode, they can work in the same way that they would on a Switch. So on this left side, you're going to see that we have some kind of teardrop semicircle buttons with a joystick on the top. On the top of this, we have an X and a triangle, which is kind of similar to the PlayStation buttons. And on the bottom, we have a bunch of buttons that are the normal Android function buttons. You'll see that we have a ring here, and this is supposed to have colored LED lights, but the only LED light that I've ever seen from this is a red charging indicator. Unlike a real Joy-Con, this one is a little smaller, but the thickness is more or less the same. Now, one of the most striking aspects about this is the fact that this guy actually has an analog trigger, and you can see this one from the real Switch does not. This one has a decent amount of travel here, with a final click as you get to the end. That's kind of similar to what you'd see on a GameCube controller. So that's one of the cool differences, that they've managed to get a small Hall analog sensor in there. Now this is a prototype shell, so we're going to see that there's a bunch of stuff on the other side, but I do have another one that doesn't have anything. The painting on this one is more of a prototype than the other one. On the inside of the controller, you can see that we have 6 pins that are used to connect this to the main console. Right now, these are only used for charging, but they said that these might be able to function in a USB connection in the future. Right now, these are strictly just wireless, and you can see I can move Sonic with no issue. Even if I take this and move it far from the console, it still works about the same as it would on a Switch. They also went as far as to put the start and select buttons on the inside, so you could use this as a gamepad for retro games if you wanted, and you could pair up a second one to do some co-op gameplay. The second controller is not the same color as my left one, and it seems to be more of a prototype because it doesn't have any LEDs at all. On the top of this one, we have a circle and triangle button in the PlayStation style, but we also have a set of ABXY buttons. The thing that's strange about this is the fact that they went with an Xbox layout for these buttons instead of a Nintendo one, even though the entire console is largely inspired by a Switch. So that's kind of a strange thing, but this thing is kind of like a PC gaming device, so that kind of makes sense. On the bottom here, we have a set of buttons that are more or less buttons for the system itself, and they don't really pertain to anything important at this point. Now, my original question for this company was why they had so many extra buttons, and they said that these are kind of meant for mapping in Android situations or in emulators. You can't map these in anything because they report as the same key code, but they are supposed to change that as time goes on. You can probably get a better idea from this point that these are not the same color, but again, these are just a prototype. The cool thing is that you can connect them up like this and make a small gamepad for this main unit. You can see that I can control the device without any issue, and this is an interesting thing because we haven't seen another device do this yet outside of the Switch. So that's something that's interesting to say the least. Let's put these aside for now so we can talk about the main unit. This has a 5.5-inch LCD screen with a very high 4K resolution. It is immediately obvious to me while filming this because I can film this at any level of zoom or position without having to worry about aliasing my camera, and I can also render games at very high resolutions if I want. The unfortunate thing about this shell is obviously that border. It's still a good screen, and we will do a proper benchmark on it later in this video. We have a camera on the side that wasn't there on an earlier prototype that I have, and I'm not sure what this is for, as it doesn't seem that useful given the fact that we already have 5 others on the back side of this device. You probably can't see it, but we also have an ambient light sensor just under the camera. Here's a side view of the unit so you can get a better idea of the controller area. These pins are your only way of charging these controllers at this point unless you purchased other hardware from Pimax, and when they are connected, they don't move that much. I would say that these move about as much as they do on a real Switch unit. On the top side, the first thing that you'll notice is that we have 2 cameras on the left and the right sides. These are used for the VR functionality on this device. We also have a combo SD card tray over here on the left side with some paint that's chipping away on this prototype that I have. If I pull out the tray, you can see that I have a SIM card slot, but this thing is not advertised as being able to use mobile networks. I don't know if they're going to go the same route that the Udon Lite did, where it's not advertised as having data, but it can have data, so I just wanted to show that off. I think that would make this a more compelling device at the price if it could use data without having anything extra. Now to the side of that, we have an air exhaust, which is about the same size as it is on the Switch Lite. In the center of the unit, we have an HDMI input port, which I didn't have on my other prototype. I'll check to see if that can function later in this video. The bottom houses our 2 cameras for motion tracking and a set of stereo speakers. These are pretty decent, but I will do a follow-up video where we compare this to the Udon handheld so you can judge them for yourself. Our final port is a Type-C port that supports DP video out up to 4K, as well as all of the normal USB functionality that you'd see from a phone. That leaves us with the back of the unit with a final camera and an outline section for the air intake. This fan is always on using the latest software that I'm using, and it can end up being a little aggressive at times when it does not need to be. This is supposed to have manual fan control at some point, but that is not implemented yet. I wanted to do one comparison against the OLED Switch because this new device was obviously inspired by it, given that they went with the whole white color scheme. The device was originally supposed to be all black, and for whatever reason they decided to go with this panda scheme where the central unit has white and black, and the same can be said for this. I actually don't think that this looks too good on here. I'm gonna put up a render on screen now so you can see what this was supposed to look like originally in all black, and I think that was by far a way cleaner look than this. They could have either gone full white with this, kind of like we've seen on the Eye Neo 2, or fully black. But I'm not really a fan of this panda layout on the controllers. The Switch OLED is better because the black main unit allows you to use different color controllers if you want. This center being white really locks you into only ever being able to use these white controllers. So if Pimax ever wanted to create different controllers in the future, which they could as a value-added service, it won't really work in this layout. So I think it's really a big missed opportunity that they decided to go with this because it's limiting and it doesn't look that clean. To do some more comparisons, we need to go down to the Switch Lite. I think this is a better comparison when we're talking about the screen because these are both 5.5-inch screens with a huge difference in resolution between them. The Switch Lite uses a 720p panel, and this one is a 4K panel playing the same game. I think there are a few differences that are easier to notice, like the contrast ratio. The Switch Lite is lacking in this department, and the panel isn't as vibrant. I want to emphasize that I'm only using this game to talk about the screen. This isn't something that you really ever want to play on the Pimax at this point because it's much slower than native hardware. In this section, we're going to talk all about software, and there is a lot to talk about here. You are currently looking at a stock Android launcher, but this isn't accessible through normal means using the retail software. This is something that I hope they will change in the future. I need to be in the retail launcher to explain some of the features, so I'm going to press the home button now and select the stock launcher from the list. Here's what it looks like. We have a standard wallpaper with a little icon in the corner that comes with your Pimax account. This isn't my account, so this icon was selected by the person who created this testing account. Our main apps are all located on the bottom of the screen, and some of these are not able to be changed. We have this VR world that we'll talk about in just a moment, and we also have the Pimax store. The account section has some info that I don't want to film, so we'll skip ahead and go to the gear section on the bottom to look at the settings. The settings menu pulls together a bunch of things from the main Android settings menu to make it easier so you don't need to swap over. The system lists my model information along with my serial number, and it has information about my controllers. These are currently paired through this, and you can see that it knows I have 2 controllers paired with a full battery. The pairing process is a bit cumbersome, and if these weren't already paired, you need to hold down these 2 buttons while you press the pairing button. I don't want to go through that process again because it's a real pain to deal with, but that's how it works. They will basically never become unpaired unless they lose a charge. Let's move over to the notification section. You can change the options here to handle how notifications will be displayed and collected. I want to point out that you can't pull down from the top to see the normal Android menu, and even when I was in the other launcher, that wasn't possible. Your only way to view any notification on this device is through the stock launcher and a little icon that they have on the right side of the home screen. That's kind of unfortunate, and I'm hoping that they will unlock stuff like that for power users. Right now, this is set up to make it seem more like a gaming console, and they're doing a decent job from that point. Some of these changes are just a little jarring for me. I'm going to skip over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth right now and go down to General. You can use this section to set the system language, the time and date, and the input method. The input method is currently set to this Chinese one. I would normally use the stock Android one, but the bottom one is a bit better from a usability standpoint since it doesn't take up a lot of the screen, so I'm opting to use it. The About section is where you'll go to check for updates, and this is the current stable version on my unit. I'm also using up most of my available storage for this video and the next one that I'm working on. I haven't bothered using an SD card yet because the 256 gigabytes of available storage is more than enough for an Android emulation device or an Android gaming device for that matter. The power management section has a few things going on that I want to talk about. My unit is currently on the automatic mode, and this is going to change a bunch of things depending on what you're doing. It can change the refresh rate of the screen, the clock speeds, and the fan intensity. There's also a high performance mode that will lock your CPU cores higher, and that's the one that I'm thinking about using for my emulation video. There is also a manual option, and from what I can tell, this doesn't do anything right now. If you select it, you can see that it has a TDP limit, but I don't really know what that means because these numbers don't make any sense. The FPS limit makes sense, but the TDP limit and the overclock limit do not, and none of this is implemented right now. TV settings gives you the ability to change your output resolution, and the last option gives you the ability to change the resolution of the screen itself. So let's go back to the main menu again, and on the right side, you've got all of your apps. This thing is kind of wonky right now, but it kind of works similar to something like ATV Launcher. You can't change where these are at all, and you can't change the backgrounds. So it's kind of limited compared to ATV Launcher, and it's even limited compared to the launcher used in Retroid or AYN devices. We have some other interesting stuff here to look at. Let's swipe over from the right side to open up the mini menu. This will tell you your FPS and your temperature, and you also have quick toggles for stuff like Wi-Fi, airplane mode, and sliders for brightness and volume. The minimum brightness on this panel is pretty good at night, and the maximum brightness also seems to be above average. There's also a toggle for performance modes, but that doesn't seem to do anything right now. I want to show the screen mapping feature on this because it's something cool that not a lot of devices have at this point. Here we are in a training match in Arena of Valor, and I'm going to start the mapping process. I'll open the floating menu and then start dragging out icons that I want. To map your face buttons, you'll need to pull out this controller icon and then press the button that you want it to be. If you look at the text, you'll see that it says left, which I hope is a bug because it also says left for other buttons. When you have this fully mapped, it can be kind of confusing to see which button goes to which action, but even when you have two things mapped to the same label, only one button will operate one action. This should be something that's easier for them to fix. We could map more buttons than this, but this is good enough for now. You can see that the controls work just fine. In this instance, we wouldn't want these map buttons to be this visible, so we can open up that menu again and change the transparency. The cool thing about this is that we can even unhook the controllers and still be able to play this game. There are not many handhelds that give you this kind of support, and the ones that do only do so with connected wireless or wired controllers. You can imagine how useful something like this would be if I had this connected to a TV and I was sitting on a couch wanting to play my Android games. I can see people enjoying the device in this way. The only thing that sucks is that they didn't put a stand on the back of this unit. They said the screen was too small, so they didn't bother, but I think it could have been useful depending on what you're doing and where you are. If you were on a train and you wanted to play some co-op with a friend, the stand would come in handy, even though the screen is smaller than the normal Switch. It just seems like a missed opportunity. Obviously, this screen mapping tech doesn't have nearly as many options as Mochi or Retroid, but it is a nice start for now. These controllers are also nice to use in this way, and the latency doesn't seem that bad. I'm still looking forward to seeing if the USB connection ends up being possible. I did want to show off the HDMI input in this video. I asked for an application to be able to view the signal, and they gave me one. When I try to open it, I just get a white screen that doesn't do anything. So that isn't something that I can test at this point. That leaves us with the VR functionality as the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of software. To be able to use this device in VR mode, you need to have their headset. You take off the controls and slide the device into the headset after you select the VR World app. That's going to reboot your device into a different launcher. The image on your screen will be distorted, but the glasses inside the headset will correct them and make the image look clear. The headset that I have has a wide field of view with lower image quality. They have another one that has a smaller field of view and higher image quality. If you are not looking directly into the headset, the image will not look that good, but I am going to try and film what it looks like so you can see. I had to destroy my headset in order to get my camera in here better. I just want to say, excuse the quality that you're about to see. Even though I filmed this in 4K, it's very difficult to film what it looks like, and it doesn't look anywhere near as clear as it does when I'm using the headset myself. It should be good enough to get a rough idea of what this system is like. Let's start by talking about the space that we're in. You can see that we're inside this VR lounge, and you can see the entire room is rendered with PS2 or PS3 graphics. We have a bar off to the side over there, and a couch behind us with the company logo. There's also a logo on the wall with a clock that doesn't update and a door in the distance. Right now, I am where a coffee table is, but this device can track your physical movement, so I can start to walk this way if I want. And my view inside the world will change too. I can even walk through the screen if I want to see behind it. On the bottom of our main screen, there are a bunch of icons, and this window is the biggest one that you'll see in this space. When you open up a normal app, you'll have different options to change the size to fit your needs. There are a lot of settings that go into this VR mode, and I only want to go over a few. We can change our controller type inside the settings menu, and we can also turn off head tracking, which is what I'm using now. There's another option that doesn't fully work at this point, but that's called Safe Zone. You would use this setting to set up your VR environment. If you walk outside these bounds, the VR world will shut down, and the cameras on the device will show you a black and white view of your surroundings so you don't trip. After I open up an emulator, you'll see that the bottom bar changes. We have three options that we can use to change the size of our rendered window, but I'm going to stay with the smallest one because it's the easiest to film. After we select the one that we want, we need to press a button on our controller to bring our controls back to the active application window so we can launch a game. If I stand up and I walk over to the screen, you can see the OSD information for this game is there in the corner. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but you can also go up right to the screen and see all of the pixels if you wanted. I usually like to sit back near the couch and play my retro games using the medium screen option. You can see that it performs well, but more demanding games than this can mess up the VR world that you're in. If you played something like Switch, the entire room would crap out. There are 4 environments for this app. I just showed you the day one, which I don't like to use on my unit because it's too bright. They have an evening one, which changes the lighting inside and the sky outside. I usually use the night one because it's less busy. This one is nice because it's the darkest. It's got a few stars if you look up and a full moon. There's one new one in here that I've never seen before that I'm going to look at for the first time while filming this. Space flight. Oh, that's pretty cool. I've never seen this one. Ooh. Oh, that's badass. I gotta stand up for this. That is sick. This one's really cool. This one's like one of the better ones. Wonder if I can go out this window. No, can't go that far. So yeah, that's the VR world function. Again, sorry for the shit quality, but this was very difficult to film, and this was the best that I could do. I want to leave this section giving you an example of what I meant when I said the VR world can break. Here's a 3x PS2 game, and you'll see that things start to go crazy. So just keep that in mind. If I'm ever going to use this, I tend to play retro games, so I don't tax the system too much. If you limit the system to that, it's a very good experience. I've seen a lot of comments from people that are wondering if the LCD version of this is, decent. So far, I've used the QLED version and this one, and I think this screen is better than a lot of the LCD screens that are out there, and it's even better than the QLED prototype that I've used. But I do want to do a full panel measurement so we can see what we're looking at in terms of contrast ratio and brightness. So here's the data that I got for this panel. I also went ahead and did some benchmarks for the CPU and GPU. This processor identifies as a Snapdragon 865, but it's listed as being a Snapdragon XR2. This pretty much just means that it's a rebranded 865 with maybe some small software changes, but the chip performance should basically be the same. The processor can overclock and undervolt to get some extra performance, but this is what I was able to get on stock. In 3D Mark, I ran the test 2 times with automatic mode and high performance, but the results were essentially the same. I ran a Geekbench test, and our single core performance is almost double that of the Odin Pro, and our multi-core score is also pretty good. I got a score of 3,408 for Vulkan, and a score of 3,248 for OpenCL. These scores can approach 6,000 with overclocking. Let's finish off this first look video with some gameplay. We'll have a much longer video going over only emulation after this one, but I did want to show that this can emulate Switch games. These 2D games run too fast right now due to some settings in Skyline, but they do work. 3D ones also work. Here's some GameCube and Wii emulation. I also wanted to include a PS2 title. Here's Ratchet & Clank at 2x native resolution. This is something that doesn't run that well on a lot of other handhelds that are out there right now. I wanted to see if 3x would work, but we get some slowdowns when we destroy some boxes. So this would need an overclock to run well. And as I showed in VR, PS1 also works well at high resolutions. This video is getting to be quite long, so I'm going to wrap up things here. This device has a ton of things going on, and I only scratched the surface when it comes to what this thing is advertised as being able to do. I'll do an emulation video on this next, as well as a comparison video against Udon. If there's something that you'd like to see, you can leave a suggestion down below. Happy gaming, everyone!